And now here is part 2 of the TomSito CGI interview.
Now, an interesting thing about motion capture, too, was that, when I started exploring the roots of motion capture, people would say, well, okay, PDI, Pacific Data Images, in 1989, did a thing for the Jim Henson show called Waldo C. Graphic.
Yeah.
And it was the first, they had the Waldo harness, which is the big harness with all the wires coming out of it, or the sensors, and everything you did, the figure did. So talking to the artists who worked on that, I said, well, where did you get your ideas from? Where did that come from? And then you traced it back further, and they were experimenting with this kind of stuff in the 60s. And I said, you actually have to go back to Ask Mr. Lincoln and the Disney audio animatronics. Because like Wattel Rogers, who was the engineer at WDI, had a harness with the wires coming out of it, and everything that he did, the Lincoln animatronic did, and it was recorded onto tape. Bill Justice, who was a Disney character animator, was there overseeing the lip sync and all, and it's the same kind of idea. And they said that they got their stuff from the government, from the Air Force, because Disney and the Air Force had a very good relationship through the 50s, doing programming, training films for them and all. So whenever any kind of technology was being declassified, Disney would usually get first crack at it. So. So it's interesting, because you take one thread and you run it back and you go, okay, how far back does this go?
Well, I always think of mocap as just being directly linearly descended to rotoscope.
Yeah.
Because although the technology is completely different, it's the same principle. You're trying to capture a live performance.
Yeah. There was a thing in the teens, and early 20s called Laban notation, and that was the idea of how like composers write in symbols to write music. So we had these accepted symbols of what's a quarter note, a half note, a hold. Those symbols to write music. Dance people wanted to figure out how can we write down what Nijinsky is doing, or how can we write down what Balanchine is doing? Is there a way to do this? And they came up with a series of symbols that would denote timing and weight and sort of balance and all, so that you could record what a dancer was creating on stage for future generations. And they tried this when they had actors with put on these black dance skins, and they would put the symbols on them and then film them, and figuring that would give an idea to future choreographers that how to approach this particular Stravinsky ballet or something. So,
sure.
So and it's another route. It's another one of those things that would have come out of it. And what I was fascinated to was I was talking with Dave Snyder, who was one of the people at Disney Imagineering when they were doing the animatronics, and they said that when they were working out what the presidential figures would do. At one point, somebody said, "Hey, this is like Laban notation." And I said, "There's the connection right there." So stuff like that I find fascinating.
It's always funny to go down to the Hall of Presidents in Florida because they have a speech by the current president. I saw the one with Bush. I saw the more recent one with Barack Obama. Then you have the Lincoln speech.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, and of course you have an actor for Lincoln and you have the real guy for the recent president.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, and and as I was, that's that issue that Daniel Day-Lewis did in the Lincoln movie, which was trying to figure out Lincoln's voice. Because we grew up with the Canadian actor Raymond Massey, who had a very deep baritone, and we just got this idea that Lincoln had a very deep voice. When eyewitnesses said no, he had a high voice, he had a high nasal twang, and that
Illinois.
Yeah, he had a western drawl, and they said that when he first gave a speech in New York, people laughed at him because they just said he sounded like such a hick, but then they started listening to what he said and said, oh. That's pretty good.
Well, it's the same thing, when Henry Fonda did Lincoln, it was, people think, oh, Henry Fonda. But You know, people go, oh, it's Henry Fonda. They don't go, oh.
Yeah.
With Daniel Day-Lewis, you go, oh, Lincoln. With Henry Fonda, you go, oh, Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda. Yeah, it's just like my father. Was a World War II veteran, and remember George Patton. And we're used to the movie with George C. Scott with his very deep, gravelly voice. And he goes, "No, Patton had a high voice.
Yeah,
It didn't sound like that at all."
yeah,
You know,
oh
so,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, Lewis was trying to get what historians. The same thing with Hal Holbrook. He was trying to capture how Mark Twain sounded, based on evidence. So.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because the fun part about doing a book like this is that like this.
Hey.
Hey, there you go. Plug, shameless plug. Is that is that you have this dovetailing of hard advanced technology and art kind of overlapping one another, and kind of like the research scientist and the conceptual artist kind of working in the same. And it's funny that Rebecca Allen, who was she's the chair of computers over at UCLA, who was a fine artist originally, and she did a lot of great stuff in the 80s when they're doing videos for like Kraftwerk, and she did the Catherine Wheel with for Twyla Tharp and David Byrne. But she said it's interesting that both the research scientist and the conceptual artist deal in abstractions and visualization of abstractions. So in a way, they're kind of
They've dovetailed.
Yeah, they kind of overlap, and actually they complement one another. And it's very because the main thing I hope anybody gets across when they're reading this book is the wonderful guerrilla kind of style which CG was developed, which is there was no advanced plan for CG. There was no master corporate strategy.
Nobody knew where they were going.
Yeah. I mean, John Kennedy didn't go, our goal is to make a computer animated film in 10 years. We do this not because it is easy, but because it is hard. It's like that didn't happen. It's like CG was a collective dream of scientists and doctors and hippies and beatniks and nonconformists and math nerds, all working under this common dream of they wanted to create computer graphics. In the 80s, people used to talk about computer animation's 10 years away. Computer animation's 10 years away. And then when they didn't have social structures to compare notes with one another, a way to communicate, they invented their own. So that's SIGGRAPH. And SIGGRAPH originated out of up in the Bay Area. In Silicon Valley, they had the People's Computer Club, and then related to Homebrew Computer Club, and it was basically a way for people to get together and hang out and kind of share notes with one another and share their discoveries and go, look what I figured out. Oh, try this. Try this, and so it's interesting that that a lot of this stuff was done almost under the radar. Ralph Baer, who wrote one of the earliest computer games, if not the first, the Magnavox Odyssey, was basically working at a government contractor. It was like sort of a thing that did like weapon systems or something for the military. And he basically took a couple of scientists on their spare time and said, let's try and figure out a game. And everything, and then it became one of the first games. So you always had this sort of under the radar, kind of things. Of people just making something just as an experiment.
Well, there wasn't an overarching mogul that said, Steve Jobs could have been that guy and maybe advanced it faster, but he was going in a different direction, right? As you write in your book.
Yeah.
He didn't see it.
Yeah, like Dr. Alex Shore at New York Tech is probably like the closest, where he invested a lot of his own money in creating computer graphics in the mid-'70s, but it was like kind of too early,
Was he trying to do an animated feature? Was he trying to?
Yeah, I think they were. I think they were trying to animate, but it's just there was so much to invent and there was so much to try to create that I think as the more they got into it, the more deep they realized the subject was. Like I remember they said at one point that this is around 1982, pivotal year. Was they had this thing called the Works, which was a 3D computer animation of these few figures and a giant ant sort of machine that's being operated, and they sat back and they did the math. And they said to do a feature-length film in this technique, just to render it would take 7 years.
Yeah.
Of 7-day weeks, 24 hours a day. Like,
that's prohibitive.
Just to render the thing, it's impossible. Yeah, But at the time, they didn't know because they were just starting.
Yeah.
So it's all this trial and error. But like you said, there was no master plan. It's just people were just doing it. And trying to figure out things. And yeah, a lot of times it's people working on their own time. Like the term computer graphics was coined in 1960 by a scientist working for Boeing named William Federer. And Federer his thing was that he was given the assignment of designing ergonomic seats for fighter plane cockpits.
Mm-hmm.
So that a pilot could sit in this thing for hours and everything comfortably. And in order to do that, he went to a computer and he built the first wireframes of a human being.
Oh my God!
And then to work out the seat and everything, how the seat would work. And like anything you do in the government, at a certain point you have to file your expense reports and submit your budgets and tell people what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so the feds were, the Pentagon was like, well, what are you doing? And he said, computer graphics.
Like come up with a term.
And that's the name. Yeah, he coined the term.
Wow. Well, it's interesting that they even have that on record.
Yeah.
Of who was the first guy that we know.
Yeah.
Well,
I gotta say, one of the problems you always have with a book is you always find out things later that like once you put a book to bed, you put it into the publisher and stuff, and it's being printed and everything, and you go through. Then you always get new nuggets of things, like you find. Like I think it was Stephen King, the writer, once joked. He said a good book is never completed; it's merely abandoned at a certain point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you can't go on with it. You just have to say screw it.
Yeah. So I found like after putting this manuscript to bed and everything, there was a recent discovery of one of the earliest digital drawings ever done.
Oh really? And
that was there was this early warning system for the government called Project Sage, and Sage was an early warning system, basically watching for nuclear attack coming from the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And it was these advanced computers. It was really the first computer screen. It was these large screens where these guys had these light pens, which is basically like a big chrome gun with a big cable sticking out of it. You poked it on the screen. I mean, if you go to the Computer Museum in Silicon Valley, they've got one of these Sage systems. And anyway, recently somebody turned up a photograph from 1956. Which is the year I was born, and it's somebody took a photograph of the screen of one of these Sage early warning radar systems, and somebody, some bored Air Force sergeant or something during the night had taken this thing and was doing girly pinup pictures. So you get this little like sort of like negative image, black and white drawing of like a Vargas girl or something.
And that was the first.
Yeah. That's the earliest one that anybody can recall. So,
incredible.
Yeah.
Well, jumping ahead back to the late '80s, where everything started to come together, and where you had Pixar doing their shorts. How hard was it for them to talk Steve Jobs, who just wanted to sell hardware, into even doing the shorts?
Yeah. I think like the argument was made, to Steve by Ed Catmull and the other team, that each short would focus on another element that they had discovered, which was basically, a way to advertise what their abilities were to potential clients. So when they could go to clients, they could go, we can do fabric. Or we could light this figure, or we could do transparencies, or we could do translucence. So each short had a little thing to it that would be, like
an angle.
Yeah, like Luxo Jr. was about the directed light and everything, how it would light a figure. Jerry's Game was about facials, facial animation and fabric. So like each one had a little something that was basically an advertisement, for the company. And one of the other big things that Jobs did you know, to promote the company was that when they did make the deal for Toy Story, he fought very hard in the negotiations for the name Pixar to be right up front, right next to Walt Disney Presents. Like if you look at the movie Tron, there was about 3 or 4 companies who did work on Tron, like Robert Abel and Associates, Digital Productions, and Judson Rosebush, but all their credits are buried in the back row, in the roll credits at the end, next to the dog trainer and the caterer and the greenskeeper and whatever. And people rarely look at those back rolls and stuff. But Jobs understood branding, and he understood having a brand name loyalty, and so he fought very hard that he wanted the word Pixar to
up
be
front,
right there,
right next to Disney.
Yeah, and now it has become a brand. So people all around the world, they hear the name Pixar. It's funny. It was explained to us around the time we were working on Mermaid and Oliver and Company, and I remember one exec said there was a thing that they called a franchise, and the franchise at Disney meant when you think facial tissue, you think Kleenex, the very next word. When you think photocopy, your very next thought is Xerox. And when you think quality family entertainment, you think Disney. And he says it took decades to build that reputation so that the average person out there who doesn't want to think about these things, they hear the word Disney and they go, oh, yeah.
Certain thing pops into them. Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse, yeah. And Jobs wanted the same thing for Pixar. He wanted that recognition. As soon as you heard the word Pixar, you thought, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to see a good quality film.
And it helped because it helped him sell the company for a pretty penny.
Oh yeah.
Years later.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's arguable. They said that Apple made Jobs a millionaire, but Pixar made him a billionaire. I mean, the tie-ins and the connections and everything were just, phenomenal.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like, movie studios have hits and they have failures, they have ups and downs. Pixar's had 13 hit movies in a row.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Oh yeah.
It's like it's unprecedented in Hollywood.
And everybody genuflects.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so how did Toy Story come about?
Yeah. Well, originally they had their short Tin Toy, and Tin Toy was like an award winner for them. I don't know if it won the Oscar, but it was like one of their big breakthrough shorts, like So Junior. And so originally they were working on a treatment idea of taking the character of Tinny from Tin Toy and expanding it into, originally they were talking about a half-hour special. They wanted to do a half-hour TV special.
Mm-hmm.
And they pitched that at Disney's. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the head of animation production at the time, said, if you're going to go through all the trouble to build models and to build, backgrounds and, to build all those resources that you're going to need, you might as well go for a feature, because it doesn't seem worth it to do it for a half hour. And then as they started to work it out, they decided that the Tinny character in Tin Toy was too limited because he always has the little band on his back, the drums and stuff, and he's got the cymbals, and it's too much stuff to work with, So then they thought, okay, well, let's go to a ventriloquist dummy, and it's like, and that didn't work. They didn't like that, and then they went to the cloth doll of Woody, named for Woody Strode, the African American actor from the 1950s.
John Ford,
yeah, Major, Sergeant Rutledge, and then they paired him with the spaceman character, and there was a '60s toy called Major Matt Mason, which would kind of look like an astronaut kind of thing, and he had his own capsule and stuff, and was the box he came in looked like a capsule, and then they said Buzz Lightyear, so it's Lightyear with Buzz Aldrin, who was one of the original of the Apollo astronauts. And it's funny because originally the story was much darker. It's like Woody was actively trying to get rid of Buzz, to practically kill him. Figure out a way to get him from the scene because he was jealous and he saw him as a threat to his relationship with Andy. So I think Buzz falls behind the bureau or something like that, and and one of the reasons I went for Tom Hanks as a voice was that Hanks had just done League of Their Own, the baseball movie.
Yeah.
And what they liked about it is that Tom Hanks in the baseball movie is an asshole, but he's a charming asshole.
Right.
Even though he's a miserable person in
Yeah.
his character, you like him.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what they wanted for Woody. They wanted a character that could do things that were maybe like not that nice, but that he was still charming.
Well, he was also the second lead in that. The thing that's funny about League of Their Own was he said to the director, a woman director, I can't remember her name, but she said,
That was Penny Marshall.
yeah, I think it was,
Yeah.
he said to her, I've had 4 flops in a row, and, I'm happy to take Second Banana because I got to have a hit.
Yeah. That's probably the Bonfire of the Vanities era.
Oh, yeah, it was. It was just he had 3 or 4 back-to-back bombs.
Yeah, Joe and the Volcano.
Yeah, and all that stuff.
Yeah, but yeah. So the interesting thing is that the story was a little darker, and then at one point it was a big pitch to the big shots, to the command, and it wasn't working, and they called it like a Black Friday kind of thing. I mean, I do remember, and again too, there's another connection.
You were there at the time.
I was there. Yeah, it's like I was in the development department, working with Brenda Chapman and Chris Sanders and a bunch of folks. It was still Charlie Fink was still running the department, but Tom Schumacher hadn't taken over yet. And I remember all the Pixar guys going into a big pitch and then coming out, and and I ran into Joe Ramf, who's a friend of mine, and Joe was head of story. And I said, how'd it go? And he didn't say anything. He just rubbed his ass like, oh. Like we just got kicked really hard. So.
Jeffrey wasn't buying it.
No. So the whole thing, so they revamped the thing and all, and so sort of get rid of that sort of edge sort of thing to it. And Josh Whedon did some rewrites on it. Was brought in, and there was a couple of other people kind of helped out. And I mean, it's one of those collaborations that just. It was a bunch of people, doing stuff, and it's that collective kind of idea, and it's funny because it's always sort of anathema to a lot of people who ascribe to the auteur filmmaker, like
everybody brings something to the table.
Yeah. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock had Ernst Lehmann and Robert Boyle, and
his wife.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. She did. I mean, all these people all have input, on the film. There's not like the lone genius,
No, well, it never is.
That's how
but
films get done.
The French have the auteur theory.
Yeah.
And I think it works for books, but because one guy writes the book.
Yeah.
But even there, you've got guys editing it, and you've got input and stuff like that.
I mean, I was talking with Linwood Dunn once about in all the years he had been doing motion picture visual effects in the 30s and 40s. He did the visual effects on Citizen Kane and things. And I asked him, I said, have you ever met a real genius? Like a person, you always hear the word genius. Genius is such an overused word in Hollywood. He's a genius. She's a genius. Whatever. I said, have you ever met a real genius? And he said, Orson Welles. He says the first day that I was with him, and he was only like 31 or something.
Oh, he's a little younger than that. He's like 24.
Oh, yes, true. Yeah, it's true. He's much younger. Yeah, and he just pointed at the optical printer, and he said, "What's that?" And Dunn explained to him the principle. He said, we film, a person against black, and we film a toy city, like an ancient Greek city, and we put a little blacked out area, and then we mat in the person into the city, and he looks like he's in that city. And Wells. And he says, by the end of the day, Wells had not only grasped the concept, but he was suggesting shots that Lynn said, you can't do that. And he goes, oh, yes, you can. And he was teaching him, like, how to do it. And he's like, But even then, too, Wells still had, Howard Koch and had Toland, the cameraman. He had some very good people working with him as well.
Especially with motion pictures.
Yeah.
But
it's a collaboration, and the thing about animation was that part of the success of Toy Story. But you didn't think we'd get this Toy Story again, did you? But part of the success of Toy Story was that, like a friend Jim Bohillen was once saying, he says the greatest success of Toy Story is that up till then, every movie you watched with computer graphics, you were aware that that's a computer graphic. Like I'm watching a computer image now. He says Toy Story was the first movie that halfway through the movie you forget you're watching computer images and you just want to know what happens to Woody and Buzz.
Yeah.
And that's victory.
You lose yourself in the movie.
Yeah, which is the point of movies. I mean, John Huston, the great Hollywood director, said, if I can make you forget who you are and where you are for 90 minutes, I've done my job.
Yeah.
Because that's all what it's all about, is losing yourself in the film.
Yeah.
And Toy Story was the first CG film that accomplished that. Where you just, like I point out in the book, the real turning points for CG happened between like 1991 and 1995. That's when the big movies, it's like Terminator 2 and Beauty and the Beast and Jurassic Park and Toy Story happened. Because before those movies, the idea of making a movie with computers was considered ridiculous. And after those movies, the idea of making a movie without a computer was ridiculous. And that was the big turning point. I'd say Jurassic for me was like one of the big. That was like the.
And there's not that much computer-generated imaging.
No, it was only 6 minutes. It was only 6
But
minutes.
you think there's a lot more.
Yeah, and it's such a big deal, and they were so worried about, they said, the Spielberg put in the end shot of the T-Rex roaring after it kills the one or two little raptors in the lobby, because originally in the first draft, when Dr. Grant and the kids and stuff are running through the lobby, the raptors get killed by the collapsing skeletons. Like the skeletons break and they fall on the raptors and kill them, and that's how they get away. And while looking at it, Spielberg said, it's very unsatisfying. It's not a very good ending. And the T-Rex was so exciting. Like the T-Rex was such a big figure earlier in the movie. It's weird that we don't bring him back. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So the idea that the T-Rex shows up at the end and kills these things, roars and the banners falling down, that was like the big moment shot. And they said that they were very afraid because a lot of the CG shots they had done were at a distance.
At night,
at
in
night.
the rain.
Yeah, there's a lot of masking, yeah. And here the thing is going to be theoretically like 5 feet away. His nose is like 5 feet away from the camera. And they were worried about what they call jaggies, which is when a digital image gets too close up, you start to see the pixels. And you see these little jagged edges on, like an old-fashioned scoreboard or something, And when they shot this, they were all like on pins and needles watching that last shot. And they go, nope, looks good. It holds up.
We're good.
We're good. So.
Well, that was really because I think up until about 1990, everything was still analog, right?
Yeah.
And then you got over that hump.
It really flipped.
And suddenly it's like everything's CG, and all of the analog labs and studios and effects houses are fading out.
Yeah, I mean,
just like that.
Yeah, I mean, a thing I find, a thing I point out in the book that's fascinating. The book is another plug. Is that in as early as 1974, in the Oscar ceremony, Francis Ford Coppola gets up, and as it's a custom, he won the previous year for The Godfather. So he got up to present the Best Picture award, the last award of the evening. I think it went to Cabaret that year. And when he got up, everybody expected, that he would do this whole, like at that time, it's like you're 3 hours into the ceremony, just read the name of the Best Picture, and we can all go to our parties, and we're all tired. And Coppola gets up and launches into this manifesto of the coming of digital cinema. He talks about how there's a revolution coming in electronics and computers, and it's going to redefine the way we make film, and people will never think the same way. And later on, he was saying film itself will be an anachronism.
And he was dead on.
Yeah, and everybody thought he was crazy. It's like William Holden and William Wyler are in their chairs, like, the hell are you talking about?
This was 75, right?
Yeah.
74, 75.
74, yeah. And it's just, it seemed like an amazingly, like, crazy thing to say. But he was like John the Baptist yelling about, guess what's coming, And just, now in retrospect, everybody's like, yeah, he was right. Yeah, it's true. Because, I think it was at the end of this year, whatever, the studios are just going to stop making film, period.
Well, all the labs have gone out of business.
Yeah.
They're only making in the labor area. We were talking about this yesterday. The IA head of the IA out here on the West Coast was saying there used to be unionized film labs. The Lab Technicians Union had 2,300 people 20 years, 25 years ago. Now they've got 20.
Wow.
Because it's all digital. It's all intermediate and digital, and there's not going to be any film. There isn't any film for the most part. There's a little bit film here and a little bit film there, you know. But Technicolor has repurposed. Kodak is out of business.
Yeah, when Kodak went bankrupt, that was a shock.
Well, in Polaroid,
God,
there's no Polaroid because who the hell needs? Who the hell need? You have an instant picture in your smartphone.
Yeah.
You don't need Polaroid cameras.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's just like you know, when I was starting in the '70s, the largest local in the IA, you know, in the IA was the projectionist.
Yeah.
Which is like every theater needed one projectionist to run those, you know, hit the marks and change the carbons and, you know, and do the whole thing and all. And then it went to the platter system and then the automated one. And
now there's no film at all.
Yeah, yeah. And they were like decimated. It was like almost like it was like a tenth of what they were, you know, when they were the largest, most powerful locals, you know, at one point.
And they helped the IA organize the entire nation because we were not going to show your film unless you knuckle under.
Yeah.
And they were a pressure point. Yeah. But, you know, technology has a way of changing things and changing the way people work and work dividing lines and all that. It's like no film loaders.
Yeah.
You know, it's all gone.
There was a process for a while. I mean, even in the all through the 80s into the 90s, there was the job of film recorder, which is that you had your digital files, but you needed a way to go from the digital files on your computer to the final thing that you're going to show in a theater, and that's where film recording came in. And there was a whole category of film recorders, and I don't know if anybody does that anymore.
Well, VHS, DVD, Blu-rays are going to go away to a large extent because everybody will just stream them down from the cloud. So, you know, everything changes and technology kind of goes where it's going to go. And I think your book is a good example of that. Nobody knew where it was going to go.
Yeah.
And it didn't go by a route that anybody thought it would travel.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, because, you know, when I started writing it was the year that Bill Kovacs passed away. And Kovacs was a brilliant software designer who had worked on some of the early versions of Maya, and basically Wavefront, you know, was his baby, and he was like one of the great software, you know, specialists. And he died in his 50s, unfortunately. He was very young, and that kind of like surprised a lot of people in the industry. And you know, and I said, you know, we got to start writing history, you know, because I said Jurassic Park was 20 years ago. It's like
that's the startling thing. Jurassic Park was 20 years ago. Toy Story was like 17 years ago.
It's
and Ants was Spielberg was Katzenberg's first CG animated feature. And how did that come about? Because you have quite a bit about that in the book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the DreamWorks group comes out of PDI, Pacific Data Images, and PDI was started by Carl Rosenthal and Glenn Entis and Richard Chang in the 80s, and they were a sister company to Pixar for a long time. They did a lot of social stuff together, and they would sponsor parties at SIGGRAPH together, and it was always Pixar PDI. You know, a lot of personnel went back and forth between them. Like Glenn McQueen and Rex Green, you know, would go, you know, they'll work in one company or the other. But then when the feud, you know, sort of evolved between Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, that led to the creation of DreamWorks. You know, and Disney's had Pixar. And Katzenberg with DreamWorks wanted, you know, something equal that they could compete with. You know, they bought into PDI, and there was a script going around of basically, you know, PDI, they had a script idea that they'd been working on with at DreamWorks, and the whole idea was originally, wouldn't it be fun to have a character voiced by Woody Allen next to a character match by Arnold Schwarzenegger? So we want Woody Allen and Arnold Schwarzenegger to be buddies, in this idea. And as early as 1996, I think it was, or something, we were talking about this idea with the bugs, a character, with ants. And at the same time, Pixar was working on its Bug's Life. And it's a natural progression, because it's something that plays to the limitations of the medium at the time, to use insect characters and to be in this like new different world. And Schwarzenegger wound up passing on the project, and so they got Sylvester Stallone instead to be the voice of the other character. So it was Woody Allen and Stallone together. And but then it turned out that both of these films were sort of coming to a head right around the same time.
Finishing up
at the same time, yeah. And there was a big blowout between Jeffrey and Steve Jobs and Catmull and Lasseter and everything about who was trying to upend who, because the first movie that comes out will make the second movie look like a pale imitation. So there was that danger. So there's a whole strategy to releasing films that they have to be, jump ahead of the other ones, before the other one comes out. So there was some bad blood about that lasted for a long time afterwards, But the more I researched it, it's like you can't really say that one studio was actively trying to.
Because I think John at one point in time thought that Jeffrey was trying to.
Yeah, he was trying to dig him. Yeah, and I think it's just the unfortunate thing that both Pixar and PDI fell into this battle that was going on between Eisner and Katzenberg. Which was on a bigger scale. Kind of like the way when Katzenberg bought the land for the DreamWorks campus, Disney immediately bought all the land around it so that they could never expand. So they would always have to be kept there, and they would do, and then DreamWorks was trying to work out a deal with ABC to do television, so Disney buys ABC, so it was this kind of
grudge match,
and they just got stuck in the middle of it. So.
But where do you see CG going into the future?
Well, it's interesting. The fascinating thing is just seeing, seeing the people who had predicted stuff in the future, and just seeing who was right, who was wrong, and all like that. They were talking with a production assistant who was working on 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968, and he said Arthur C. Clarke was standing on the set, and he said to him, he says, "My boy, see all these computers here. Someday the power of all this technology, all this computational intricacy, will be boiled down to a chip the size of your fingernail." We thought he was nuts.
He wasn't far wrong.
That's weird. Yeah, So for our future, I mean, there'll probably be more development in what they call behavioral software. They'll probably have like pre-worked out personality patterns for characters, so that you'll build a character and they'll actually like put in impulsiveness or slovenliness or eccentric tics or something. So how much will supplant the artist, we're not sure, because the reason why you need artists is because they're going to, like the CG development proved, it's the people who think outside the patterns and outside the box that create the innovations that everybody follows.
And you need human beings for that.
Yeah, you still need that. I mean, for years now. I remember 15 years ago seeing a note about somebody invented a computer program that could write a novel, and it's like, well, I haven't read one by one yet.
It would probably be a kind of a blah.
Yeah.
Kind of reading experience.
Yeah, it's being able to think originally, and so there probably will be. More advanced work with motion capture, where they finally will get it subtle enough so that you could read the eyes and you could read small facial tics and everything. There'll probably be more, like Massive right now, the program with all the smaller, where they have like the 10,000 soldiers and stuff. There's always a soldier too running away and everything. So there'll probably be things for mass, groups like that. So you have an army charging, and then some horsemen ride through them, and there'll be more of that stuff. But then you'll still need the original thinker, and all for the medium to go forward.
The thing that's struck me about computer graphics, each step of the way, the suits would say, we can get rid of people, and it's never worked out that way.
Yeah.
They've always added staff.
Yeah. Well, the big selling point, again too, it's another thing I remember. Like the big selling point in the '80s was about computer graphics was that it was going to be far cheaper than traditional, and it's going to require fewer people. And it'll only be a handful of people. And it's funny because for a little while it seemed like it, because like when they went to the cap system, you used to have like 80 ink and paint people. Then they sent stuff overseas and it was done by 400 people overseas. Then when it went digital, the same work was done by 10 digital people back here.
Except it happened almost immediately. Mm-hmm. With analog, you could do 3, 4, 5 levels.
Yeah.
And very quickly the art directors discovered, hey, you can do 80 and you don't lose any quality. You don't lose any.
Yeah.
You don't have any light refraction. It's great. So when you suddenly go from 4 levels to 80, suddenly you need more bodies.
Yeah.
So it didn't, in the long run, it didn't cut staff. If they'd stayed with 4 levels digitally, would have cut staff a lot.
Yeah.
But they increased the complexity of each shot, and so overall, you added staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in Little Mermaid, they were limited to 2 colors. You had Ariel day colors, Ariel night colors.
Yeah.
And then there was like one set for the scene with Ursula where she gets transformed, and it was like a very eccentric lighting on her. But otherwise, you couldn't go beyond day colors and night colors on a character. And now you can art direct every shot, so every cut can be separately art directed. So so instead of like saying the lesser crew, you look at credits of movies now and you see these Roman legions of names going by. Just like
and somebody's doing those.
Yeah, and was a Little Mermaid was like $70 million or $80 million, I think, was the budget.
No, it was much less than that. It was like 35.
35, wow. Okay.
Lion King was like 52. It was going up.
Yeah.
By the time you got to Pocahontas, it's in that mid-90s time, everybody's salaries
are going up,
The salaries drove a lot of it.
But now, like, what is it? The announced budget of Brave was $185 million. Mars Needs Moms was like around 200.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. Quest for Camelot cost somewhere around $200 million, but that's because they had huge overhead and development costs that went on forever and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and Tangled cost $250 million because they had 12 years of tinkering with the story.
Oh yeah. I mean that happens, and so, so the idea that it was going to cost cut, it's like, believe that if you want.
Well, you can cost cut if you say no to a production designer.
Yeah.
But if you say, oh, yeah, okay, we'll do that. Oh, okay, we'll do that. I mean, I talked to a supervisor a month ago at DreamWorks, and he said, they've only started saying no to people during this contraction period. He said the last 3 years, people would come with their wish lists, and they go, oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But suddenly it's like, and my personal feeling is that Fox is breathing down their necks saying, blue skies are costing 90.
Yeah.
So, get these things down. So I think that there's kind of the word going out that the production designers can't have everything they want on their Christmas list.
Yeah, and again, it depends on, where you want to spend the money. I mean, if you look at the old Rocky and Bullwinkle shows and all the anime, look at Rocky and Bullwinkle and turn off the sound. And it's like, and the graphics are really crude. They're very simple. They barely move.
And done in Mexico.
Yeah. They're very. And it's funny because like Jay Ward originally wanted like Looney Tunes quality, artwork, but they said they didn't have the budget for it, and they said they had it done very cheap, out of the country. But then, the writing and the tracks are so good that they're very funny, and I think that's what they redeveloped for The Simpsons. Was they went back to the original television formula of very strong dialogue writing, like the Flintstones and the Jetsons, and then you could pass on simpler animation. But of course, in the '60s, the guys designing the Flintstones and Jetsons and all were the same guys who did Tom and Jerry. And they knew quality, so they knew exactly where they could cut corners.
Oh yeah.
So and still make it look good.
But I think in the era of CG, I think they have to figure out. I mean, Chris Meledandri, with his Illumination Entertainment films, he's doing them for less, and Blue Sky's doing them for less because they're very disciplined with what they spend money on, and what shots are money shots, and what counts, and all that stuff. And I think that's where I see a lot of the industry going. Where there'll be more discipline, and it won't be everybody getting everything they want in every shot. So it'll be interesting.
So,
is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about?
I think we're good and everything. I think we're in a good place. So I'm told the book is very readable and people are enjoying it.
I've read part of the book, and it is very readable.
It's
very conversational and a great write. And if you want to know about CG animation, how it was born, and where it is now and where it's going, Moving Innovation is probably about as good a book as you're going to be able to read about it. So thank you, Mr. C.